So as soon as I see Laura, oh, here comes Laura back now. No, Laura, we can't hear you, unfortunately. Let me. See what I can do.
Great. So I think we can kind of get going, and I can try to work on work with Laura.
Do you mind doing that, Sarah? That would be great.
Not at all.
And I can switch up the order if we need to.
Okay.
Going through, we'll make that adjustment. Today will no doubt be about some adjustments. So let's get rolling if we can. Great. All right. Well, thanks everybody. Good morning and welcome to the entrepreneurship track. You've already been welcomed to Radically Rural, but let me welcome you again to Radically Rural itself, knowing that this is among the first sessions that are happening today, which is terrific. My name is Rich Grogan. I'm proud to serve currently as the Executive Director of the Northern Border Regional Commission. And I'm also honored that I've been asked to serve as your moderator and facilitator today for this session. By moderator and facilitator, I mean that I will mostly be getting out of the way to let our incredible panel of experts share with you their stories of economic and community development in their respective corners of the country. Now, all of you likely signed up for the session because I mentioned beer in the session description. And I obviously, I did this because I knew it would work. And I also knew that I would go to a session about beer at a conference. I don't mean to disappoint you from the start, but this is a dry session. Unfortunately, today, the beer is only metaphorical. What you do after the session is, of course, up to you. What I love about this idea is that beer makers in Belgium and elsewhere have recognized that one of the key ingredients to their success is literally floating by in the air. And all they needed to do in order to brew great beer was to figure out how to capture it. They needed to think about how best to combine just a few key ingredients, capture that wild yeast, and turn it into something delicious. Delicious and lucrative, because running a Trappist monastery isn't free. I thought this method of beer making is incredibly appropriate for talking and thinking about economic development. The days of sort of cherry picking which companies you want to come to your community are long gone, if they ever existed at all. But through my own work, I've seen firsthand that a few key ingredients, if they're deployed properly, can result in communities setting themselves up to go and grab opportunity when it presents itself. So what are these ingredients? Primarily, number one, strategies and sources of funding to help companies form and grow. Number two, understanding what financial instruments are available to help communities fund projects that support smart growth. And then community champions. And those are people who drive large projects and who generally make things happen. The session that you're attending today builds on the past 2 years of sessions that I've been fortunate to lead here at Radically Rural. In the first year, we focused solely on entrepreneurship and small business growth. Last year, we focused on the concept of stage 2 companies, how to spot them and how to help them grow in our community. And this year, it seemed that the natural progression of this work was to convene a panel to talk about communities themselves. What helps them to be successful, and how do they identify the ingredients necessary to get to their vision of success? Now, fortunately, you don't have to listen to me ramble for the entire session. I assure you that my portion is almost complete, but not before I do a couple of introductory things. First, I'm going to briefly introduce you to the panelists that are going to be speaking today. And second, I'm going to give you just a few thoughts on logistics for the panel. So first, the panelists. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves briefly and sort of situate themselves in the work that they're doing, because I've always felt a little bit odd about reading people's bios out. But I just want to kind of orient you to a little bit about what they're going to be talking about so you can kind of see the progression of what we're doing today. The first, and coincidentally on the top left of my screen, I have Laurel Adams. And Laurel will be speaking about the New Americans Loan Fund, which is an innovative lending program focused on new American businesses in rural communities. Next up, and we're hoping we can get the audio problems sorted out, is Laura Oswald. Laura will be presenting an overview of putting together multiple sources of funding to help projects find success. And Laura is also going to provide a couple of examples for us. Sarah Ashton is up next. Sarah's going to provide some perspective on projects she's been involved with in her rural communities and the story of how the funding came together for these projects. Susie Paradis, did I say that correctly, Susie? Good, okay. Thank you. Susie's going to give us the perspective on putting projects together from Fort Kent in Maine. So we've got multiple states going on today, which I think is really cool. And then Lance Willard, last but not least, is joining us from the great state of Ohio. And Lance is going to give us a real, I think, practical grounding in things communities can start doing today to move their communities in the direction that they want to go. So I'm sort of billing this as from a very limited program or no program to award-winning in just a year. So buckle up because Lance is going to show you how to take that journey. Those are our panelists, and I just want to start off by thanking them for being flexible. When I was first reaching out to them, of course, Radically Rural was going to be in person in Keene, and now we're doing new technology. And as you can see, we have some challenges with that already. So thank you in advance for your flexibility and for your time today. Second, just some logistics. I know we'd all rather be in person, which I've said about many, many things in my life since March, but we're still here together, and I hope you'll all embrace this virtual experiment. Please, throughout the conference and throughout this session, I just ask that you forgive tech delays, odd disembodied noises, dogs, children, delivery people, electricians working in the background, colleagues who think they're unmuted and they're not, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We're all doing our best in this unprecedented time, and I hope you'll approach this session in that spirit. Second, please do not hesitate to ask questions, put things out in chat, et cetera. Part of my job over the next hour and a half or so is to facilitate these questions, take notes on themes that are being presented, et cetera, et cetera. So put it all out there, and if I miss something, we'll find a way to get back to it. And then per my second point, if we run out of time and we don't get your questions answered and you don't get to make that point that you know is vital, if only everyone else would hear it, please connect afterwards. The conference has made it easy to participate in exhibition spaces and other virtual community spaces. So please use those spaces to find both experts and your fellow travelers. So thanks for listening to me. That's all I wanted to say by way of an introduction. And now I will start off by passing the microphone to Laurel Adams to talk about the New Americans Loan Fund and introduce yourself. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rich. I'm really glad that you were able to get your mic working. We would be a little bit lost without you. You've done a
That's very kind. Thanks.
You have everyone craving beer at 9 in the morning. So, good morning, everyone. I'm Laurel Adams, and I am the president of the Regional Economic Development Center, which is located in Raymond, New Hampshire, and serves primarily sort of the southeast corner of the state from Portsmouth over to Nashua and up close to the Concord region. So the New American Loan Fund has been incredibly rewarding, probably the most rewarding work of my career, and has really allowed us to be innovative in how we include more people in New Hampshire in entrepreneurship, in business building, in building wealth and income, et cetera. So I'll just let you know where the program was born from, which was a process called CEDS, which is the Comprehensive Economic Development Strategy. It's a process that we do for the Economic Development Administration each year. We just had our 20th CEDS come out. It's published June 30th, so you can imagine COVID played a surprise part in that process this year. We have some unknowns as far as what our economy will look like going forward, and we're planning to address that this year, of course, and probably next year too. But what happened with the SEDS is it's a very data-driven process, and we discovered that between the last two censuses, and forgive me, I'm going back quite a ways now, that foreign-born immigrants were the only segment of New Hampshire's population that were growing, and that without them, we would have had a net population loss in New Hampshire. I think we've all heard that New Hampshire is aging, that we have out-migration of college-age kids, et cetera. We have elementary schools that have had to shut down or reduce class size, et cetera, to sort of make their budgets work with fewer children. So we looked at that segment of the population, did a lot of research, visited other loan funds in other states, learned a lot about the deep history of immigrants in this country and entrepreneurship, and particularly how tenacious they tend to be, and that they really want to be successful in their new home. And we worked with the city of Concord actually to pilot the first iteration of this loan fund, which we did in the Concord area for 12 to 18 months. And then it became very clear that there was demand throughout the state. So once we heard that demand, we formed a stakeholder group, including 5 first-generation immigrants who were either in the finance industry. I apologize, that would be the dogs in the background. In the finance industry or small business owners, because the thing that I kept hearing echoed to us was, make sure you have the people at the table as you're designing this program, because so many times there's the unintended consequences of putting something together for an audience and you've realized that you've missed a key portion. So we spent a lot of time with that on program design, and in May of 18 launched the statewide New Hampshire New American Loan Fund. And it's been a really great ride ever since. In fact, we're able to close 2 loans to New Americans this summer in the midst of COVID, which really gives me hope that our economy is going to normalize at some point soon. So I guess some lessons learned from this are we really had an opportunity to take smaller segments of our population and weave them into more mainstream financing and economic development. So, I may have a New American insurance broker, and we have, 2 other clients who own businesses in different parts of the states who need insurance. We introduce them together, a beautiful relationship is formed, and then they're referring additional people to us for help. I think, we've made right around 30 loans at this point since that May of 18 start date. So far more than we expected. And I'm not going to share my screen, but I'm going to just read off some of the types of businesses, because it's a question I get asked a lot, is what types of businesses do you help? So we helped a tax services business get started in the Concord area. And that was one of the first loans that we closed. And they have now expanded to doing bookkeeping and some financial management and oversight, and grown that business from the 3 that started up to a height of 9 employees during tax season. We had a really great situation in Portsmouth, a wonderful couple from France who were buying real estate for their bakery. And they ran into a problem that they were on a worker visa and a green card, and you cannot get our traditional government financing if you're in that situation. So we were able to help them with the New American Loan Fund. We've got a consultant who is doing all kinds of diversity and equity work. We've got nail studios. Excuse me for 1 second. I'm so. Whoever said getting 2 puppies at once was wrong. Anyway, let me jump right back in. So every kind of business, dental, digital milling, insurance, restaurants, like I said, tax services, they run the gamut, and they're all over the state, as far north as like Laconia and Loudoun, and as far west as the area near where Hannah Grimes is. So I think I'll stop there, because I know we're back a little bit behind schedule. And Rich, are we just taking questions at the end, or are we taking questions now?
Yeah, I'd like to batch the questions to the end, Laurel. Okay. That would be great. Right. And so I'm making notes about both your comments and any questions or thoughts that I see come up in the chat. and then I'll queue them up and tie them together at the end, hopefully.
Great,
That's the plan anyway.
Thanks for your patience with my yipping animal.
We're happy that the dogs are so excited about the session. I think that's really, at the end of the day, we'll take enthusiasm where we can get it. So I'm gonna skip Laura Oswald. I believe I see her on the phone. They are working on the text, working on the tech stuff. So hopefully we'll take care of that soon enough. I'm gonna go ahead and go to you, Sarah Ashton, if you don't mind taking off. Great.
Let me hope that I can share my slides here. Okay, hopefully you can see that, and hopefully I'll be able to advance that. So I'm Sarah Ashton, and I'm head of the Cambridge Valley Community Development and Preservation Partnership. Way too long a name. We thought we would describe ourselves in our name, and we call ourselves the Community Partnership locally. And we formed in response to a need, in effect. And on this slide, you'll see things that I'm sure characterize your village, vacant. I'm going to go from the bottom, vacant, buildings, limited parking. We don't have a centralized wastewater treatment system. And I got involved because Hubbard Hall, which is our art center, asked me to help them do a strategic plan. And Hubbard Hall really needed to grow. And it became very clear early on that Hubbard Hall was not in a position to address these other three issues that had been identified, partially as a part of the planning process and some other planning that the community was doing, and that there needed to be, another entity that advanced this work. So we had this amazing opportunity. There was a 2-acre historic freight yard that was for sale. It was actually right behind Hubbard Hall, and it sort of addressed a lot of people's needs on the block. And the needs were, septic, parking, and wanted to grow. So we ended up, this is this piece of property. I'm going to trace it. It's on this side of the railroad tracks, went all the way down here, and then here's Hubbard Hall. And I'll put Hubbard Hall, and there was a hotel, a beautiful hotel in the area as well. But this whole land served, this is obviously what we drew as a result, but it was a vacant piece of property. The buildings were used for self-storage. It served the key for our community and all these business needs. This is a diner here. It was pumping out its septic every 6 weeks. This building here, right here, there's another building that basically the property went through the building and it was for sale. So they had been locked out of a septic system at all. So we got it together, community members, and just asked them what they needed and asked them to create a vision. And these 2 documents that I just showed you, this is the vision that we created for this piece of property. Again, Hubbard Hall wasn't in a place, an art center, to make this happen. So we decided to form an organization. We decided to create a project. So the Freight Yard Revitalization Project was about history, culture, and commerce. It had multiple hooks for people to get involved in, and multiple ways that they could engage based on their interests. I mean, we're a small town. About 7,000 people call Cambridge it's their village, but only about 2,000 live in the village. And then we had to create an organization. So we created an organization, and this is the community partnership with our way too long name. And we made, government, business, and civic organizations were part of that partnership. As Becky pointed out, there were very different people who were involved in this organization, and we were sort of spearheading this effort moving forward. One of the keys, and I like Becky's thing, some of the old ideas don't work. One of the keys that was important for this project was the septic system issue. And for a village like Cambridge to install a centralized septic system would have cost millions and millions of dollars. So we wanted to do a decentralized wastewater treatment system for this block. It's a high needs block, a high demand for septic issues and lacking. And the first time that we dealt with, we had an engineer that we had hired. And they created a mound system, which I don't know if I've learned more about septic than I ever thought I would. But basically, in the middle of our park, we would have had a mound of sand and all sorts of stuff going on. So that blew away our park idea. So the whole idea of going to new people and young people, we brought on our board a young engineer who thought outside the box. And what we ended up doing was we purchased an 8,000-gallon EnviroSeptic, actually from New Hampshire. The inventor is in New Hampshire, wastewater treatment system, and it services the needs of 9 buildings in the area. So this is them. This is a big deal for our community. This is the septic hole, and you can see the state of the buildings that we purchased and the property. There, this is the EnviroSeptic system. It is a New Hampshire system. Here's the inventor, Dave Presby. And this is D-Night boxes. Again, I learned more about septic. Here, the young engineer was the gentleman standing there, and the septic system is actually under that park. So and fire trucks can drive on that truck. We needed to make sure that there was access to these buildings in case there was an emergency. So that was key. So the result of this was also creating new businesses and jobs. And I'm just going to quickly run through this, but these were some of the conditions of the buildings that a private building owner, because he had septic, was able to put into residential and commercial units. This is the building that was landlocked and didn't have land for septic. It was turned into and purchased by a couple and turned into a bookstore and residential units. The bookstore moved in. And then this final building, the blacksmith shop, has been converted into a building. We actually had to reconstruct that building, and it was turned into 4 office suites. Then parking was an issue. We helped we actually constructed and then deeded that to the village. The freight yard itself, we had this unique historic rural freight yard. It's intact. It tells a story in and of itself, the role that the train played in an agrarian economy, but we needed to adapt those buildings to current uses. So Hubbard Hall, the Art Center, transformed the Beacon Freight House into a visual arts and performance studio, educational studio. And so there are now hundreds of kids that come to that studio. Our second building, the Lovejoy Foundry Freight Barn, which in and of itself, I can go into a whole history about it, turned into a place for the winter farmers market. And then our final freight building turned into a black box theater for Hubbard Hall. And all this was done, in partnership with people and building owners and the nonprofit organization. And to bring beer back into this conversation, Rich, we also converted the final building and the final project that we were involved in directly. We own the passenger depot. We ended up buying the passenger depot, the elegant passenger depot, and convinced the local brewery, which Argyle is actually a dry town. It has been a dry town, and so they couldn't actually have a brewery in their exact town. So there's a and that is the last building that we involved. And then we created a park. So here's the original image, and here's the park.
Mary?
So, and we actually pulled together a lot of different funding streams for this in order to make this happen. First of all, we purchased the property, the historic rail buildings with DOT funding. And DOT funding helped us with providing access, i.e. the parking lot, the walkways, and then also rehabilitating some of the buildings. We also got funding from NYSERDA to demonstrate the
yes, they can hear. They can hear
the efficacy of this septic system, this wastewater treatment system. It was a completely new thing. We actually partnered with Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute to test the efficacy of this septic 8,000-gallon septic system for our community. If your state does not have something we call it the New York Main Street program, I would recommend you lobby for it. What it does is it It provides building owners with incentives to rehabilitate their building structures, a commercial unit, a residential unit. The 2 buildings that were on Main Street that transformed from vacant to got those funds, and it gives real incentive. It's sort of like what Becky was talking about, that infectious thing where, you know, one building owner does it, then another building owner does it. And we've had about 20 buildings in Cambridge take advantage of the New York Main Street program. And it's just really user-friendly. The community partnership ran it for a couple of years, and now we've partnered with another organization that's running it. So it's a really amazing program. And then we also received funding from Ag and Markets because the farmers market has made this its home in order to get the water line in, and to get some of the light posts up so that they could use them for the farmers market and benches and things like that. And then the property itself was zoned part of the Washington County Empire Zone, and therefore donors to the project could get a significant tax benefit, a tax credit through donating. And this is all volunteer led. This was, you know, and done. So, I mean, obviously we paid a lot of contractors and things of that sort, but the visioning and the management and the way that it was set up, in fact, was to decentralize things so that, you know, obviously the building owners were doing their own thing. Hubbard Hall was rehabbing buildings. We were rehabbing some of our buildings. And to make it sustainable in the long run, because we know we can't manage this whole 2-acre plot right now, and there's the Sewage Transportation Corporation that manages the septic system. So the whole idea was to centralize the visioning and facilitating, you know, getting funding, but decentralize the actions and decentralize the long-term maintenance and sustainability of the effort. So that's what we did.
Well, Sarah, I hope you are feeling the love from the chat community, who was really impressed with the fact that this was a volunteer-led initiative. And I just will say, to reflect back to that this is exactly the kind of community champion, you know, ethos that we're talking about, that I was sort of introducing in the introductory factor. I mean, time and again, takes people who are dedicated and willing to, oftentimes, particularly in small rural communities, volunteer time to really push these things forward. So thank you for taking us through that. If I have any septic problems, Sarah, you are going to be my first phone call. I definitely know who to reach out to now. So I'm very excited to say also that we have Laura Oswald is live. Again, Laura, thank you for persevering and not throwing up your hands and saying, you know, forget it. We really appreciate that you're contributing to this, and I will now pass the mic to you.
Okay, Rich, thank you very much. And my apologies. I hope. Good thing I brought an extra computer. So what I was going to just talk a little bit about today is funding for your projects. Some of you may have worked with a number of different funding sources, but generally there are federal funding sources, state funding sources, and to create a stack fund. So I would have to say that there's pretty much never enough money to fund all of the requests. So because of that, funding agencies have to have a way to take a look at their priorities, distribute equity region that they cover, and basically there's generally a process that's undertaken to fund these. So another thing to be aware of, priorities as well as eligible activities and tasks. So when you're trying to determine what, I'm eligible, I can do that, but it's possible that you might have what you think is a really good project and you've done a really good job writing the grant application, but even though your activities are all eligible, specific targets and priorities that year that make other projects a slightly closer fit. So I want to give you a few things to think about when you're putting together stacked funding. First thing is almost every fund can be in kind. In kind, that's basically your resource, like if you're a highway DPW department, it's the use of your highway equipment or your personnel to work on the project. It's your time and your resources. Loans will sometimes be a match, and then you can frequently match one funding source to the other. But you're going to want to look at sometimes a federal to federal funding source will not work, or a state to state will, but a combination of a federal. And just check what eligible match is. And besides these funding sources, there are sometimes smaller programs able to help a little bit. So for example, in New York, one of the only public utilities that actually for projects. So for example, building that's being rehabbed, sometimes National Grid can contribute funding towards that project. And similarly, other entities might be do the same thing. I think is a pretty common, I'm going to call it loosely, is it's very easy to say, oh, look, there's all this funding out, and I can create a project to go match this funding, and it's going to be great. It generally does not work well to do that. You're created by community need. So don't match your project to, or don't create a project because of a funding source's needs. Sometimes small changes will work, but you need to focus on what the needs of your project source match it. And again, maybe small changes might be a little bit better. I see from the chat that there are some hearing issues. I hope I am being heard, not sure. Another comment is funding source might give you a year to complete, or might give you 3 years to complete the project. So don't rely on extensions to projects. If you combined two time frame, finish your project within the time frame. Again, extensions can sometimes be held ahead, but don't count on them. That when you are jointly applying for funding, most funding agencies want to know that your project at the time of award. Generally, it's funding sources that will pay you or reimburse you for expenditures that have already happened. So you want to think about what the timing of your project is, when you are eligible to start spending, and make sure that you can demonstrate to the funding agency that your project at the time it's actually time to start incurring expenses. Another thing that can sometimes happen when you start combining, especially state and federal funding sources, introduction of one funding source will reduce the amount of another funding source. So for example, you might have 2 state entities that are contributing towards a project, and one of them says funding cannot, all state funding cannot exceed, say, 60%. A new funding source might reduce the contribution of earlier ones. So again, check that. The other point is it's critical to look at what the authorization to spend date is. As I said, sometimes funding agencies that will allow you to count expenses prior to an award letter or a contract execution, but that's very rare. Few of them will do that. we had a project that was a trails project. The original application was two different state funding sources. One of them funded and the other didn't. But so we were able to design the project and get it going and start spending money. The second project did allow expenses that were incurred up to a year prior to the application. So we were able to go back and reapply to the second funding source and actually get funded by it. Again, it's not very common. Most sources will not allow you to spend until after there's some sort of a contract or a document. The other thing that you want to be careful of is look at eligible expenses. There are a lot of funding sources out there that will have caps on things like soft cost engineering, grant administration, all of the components of your eligible at the budget that you need them to be. And then I think my final point is grant administration. It's always harder than you think. It's not that it's necessarily technically difficult. It's simply that they're frequently overwhelming in paperwork. It's going to take time, dedication, and resource. There are some funding agencies out there that I would say that if you're looking for a certain amount, administration is going to be so onerous that it's probably not worth it. So again, check into what the requirements of that administration will be. But if you do all of these things, and if you get it to match and you get it to work, you can get projects funded. It happens all the time. There are a lot of good projects. It's just a matter of taking the time to put the components to make the marriage work. So I think that was pretty much it, unless there are questions.
I called my own shot when I introduced the session and said, when our colleagues think they're unmuted and they're not. And so I'm sitting here talking away and I hadn't unmuted my microphone. Thank you, Laura, for your perseverance. I mean, yes, we did. I think we did have a connection, an issue with your connection or something that was causing the audio to be choppy, but I think your main points got through, and thank you so much for sharing that. And I've taken some notes, and we may have some more questions come up through the chat. I know I certainly have a couple of follow-up questions to ask you once our last two panelists have shared with us. So thank you very much. And now next up is Susie from Maine. So you are the representative of the great state of Maine today, Susie. So if you don't mind giving us a little bit of background about yourself, and then share with us what you brought today. Oh, and you're muted now, Susie.
Can you hear me now? Okay. Good morning. I'm Susie Parody. I'm from Fort Kent, Maine. We border the nation of Canada. And no, it's not snowing here right now. And we don't ride horse and buggy. We do have vehicles. Trying to tie in economic and business development with funding sources can be a challenge, but it is also very rewarding when you can piece all of the funding sources together and the project comes to life. I've worked on many projects that have involved funding sources and vacant buildings. So today I'm going to speak about one project that was very dear to my heart because it was a vacant building for quite some time, and we pulled together some funding sources. So how many of us struggle with vacant buildings in our communities? I'm sure most of us can all say that we all struggle with vacant buildings. My first project I worked on with the owner was to renovate an old 15,000 square foot building, and the owner was struggling to get a renter in the building. Well, the main reason he was struggling to get a renter into the building is he had $1.2 million worth of repairs needed to be placed in the building. So no one wanted to go in and put their own repair money and then rent to. So in discussions, we needed to fill the space, and bring back some tax revenue to the community. But how do you fill that void? I assessed the community, and we decided that we needed to come up with something unique that would get people into the community without just staying in the community for a few hours. We wanted them to be in our community and stay overnight. So a lodging facility was the solution. So this is the story of the Inn of Acadia. So as I mentioned earlier, $1.2 million. This building was built in 1956. It was an old convent where they housed the nuns, and later became a boarding home for adults. In the early 2000s, it was vacant. Moderate repairs were made to the building, but not many. So we had an engineering firm come in and assess the building. So the building needed to be brought to code. The roof was leaking, needed replacement. That was the main priority. Asbestos needed to be removed from ceiling to floor. We needed to replace 83 windows, 6 exterior doors, demolition and removal of interior walls. They were cement walls. We needed to make them standard size for a lodging facility. There was also the need to replace all the electrical, all the plumbing. A sprinkler system needed to be added to conform with state fire marshal's office. We needed to repair the existing elevator, provide handicap accessible entrances, on-site parking, and a new HVAC system for comfort and air quality. So a lot of work, but we managed to make it happen. We partnered with one of their local banks. They went out, they were able to loan $850,000, so leaving a gap of roughly $350,000 for the remainder of the project. I partnered with the state of Maine's community development block grants, and I was able to obtain $300,000 in grant funds to help offset that gap. Then I partnered with rural development through Rural Energy America program and was able to get $49,999 to close up the full gap. But then we still had the challenge of the on-site parking in order to comply with our local ordinance. So the town owned some land across the street from where this hotel was being renovated. We deeded some land over to the owners so that they could be in compliance for their hotel. Then I also looked into tax increment financing for the business, which assisted the business for annual tax payments for at least 10 years. So the first 3 years, they did not have a annual tax payment, which helped them start out, especially with lodging facility. It was only a 22-room lodging facility. To get the word out there, we are in northern Maine, so it gave them a break with some of their utilities and with some of their expenses. So this newly renovated Inn of Acadia can be seen. I don't have any screens to share, but if you do really want to see what the final product was, really worth going on innofacadia.org. So that was one major project. When you think about it, we used CDBG funding, rural development funding, traditional lending, local government, tax increment financing. So that's 5 different sources to make a project happen, which is great for a community because we've created a new tax base, we created 17 new jobs, and it gets people into our community for longer than a few hours. So my next project that I also would like to share is America's First Mile in Downtown Revitalization, and how improvements within the downtown can establish an economic drive within our communities. Over time, most of our communities experience changes. And we need to make our own changes to adapt with the changing times. So the town of Fort Kent hasn't been exempt like many communities nationwide. We've seen businesses shut down due to either the big box stores or online shopping. So what were we going to do to make our community revitalized once again? We got a group of working people, created a working plan, and we decided to apply for several grants to improve our facades, our existing buildings, upgrade our public infrastructure, create municipal parking for the downtown area. We improved our levee. Fort Kent is located in a floodplain zone, so we needed to build up our levee system. And all of our lighting in our downtown needed to be changed. So we were successful. We received additional community development block grants, such as micro enterprise funding of $400,000, community enterprise funding of $350,000, downtown revitalization funds for $400,000. We also did a townwide tax increment financing, which has helped us offset funds for the last 20 years. And we've also used Northern Border Regional Commission funds of $1 million and FEMA funds to upgrade our downtown. So all these funds help our community reach this common goal. But what good is it if you revitalize your downtown and you don't get people to come in? So we needed to brand ourselves. Fort Kent became the starting terminus of US Route 1 in 1926. So that was our branding identity. So we are now America's first mile. So in the last 12 years, a group of businesses, public, non-private organizations, and with sponsorships and donations, we raised enough funds to build a first mile monumental park for the travelers that come into our community and visitors to take a picture at the start of US Route 1. And back to beer, we also opened up First Mile Brewing. So, and they're expanding throughout the state of Maine at this point. We just received $60,000 this week so that they could add to, equipment and start distributing throughout the state. So I would also recommend for people to visit Fort Kent's website, because we created a 4-minute video of what Fort Kent has to offer and describing US Route 1 as our branding. And our next goal is to market this video across the US and to partner with 10 other communities along the US Route 1 corridor who are similar to our community, and offer travel destination packages for people to make the trek between Fort Kent, Maine and Key West, Florida. So a key component to making all of this happen is people within our community who were like-minded and wanted to be progressive with the same common goals. So how did this last example tie into today's session? Well, if we don't have a healthy downtown and no branding opportunity, we don't have a draw to get people to come in and visit. So like I said, our branding was America's First Mile, and our next goal is to start marketing throughout the US so we get more people to come in, visit, and it's a great economic drive. We've seen an influx, especially through this COVID, of people just traveling and wanted to take a picture at our US Route 1 mile marker. So thank you, and if anyone has any questions in regards to any grants that I've discussed, please feel free to ask me any questions.
That's awesome, Susie. Thank you so much. I know that you said it's not snowing there now, but if it's anything like where I live in Vermont, we're not too far away.
You're right. You're right. A few weeks.
Well, thank you so much. That was pitch perfect. So thank you so much for that. Next up is Lance Willard from Ohio. So Lance, if you don't mind introducing yourself a bit, and then we'll dive right into your presentation.
Thank you, Rich. It's an honor to be here. So really excited. I am the city manager of the city of Columbiana. It's a small town in northeastern Ohio. And I've been there since 2013. And our claim to fame here, we've been able to get $22 million in grants since 2014 for our community, focused a lot on infrastructure. So we're really excited about that. We have a what we call progress committee that was brought about by RCAP, that's Rural Communities Assistance Partnership. And we work with Roberta Streifer and Deb Martin of Ohio. And we've been working with them for several years, and they really got us to focus on our downtown. And they started out by doing that in 2019. They brought Deb Brown in, and you just saw Becky and Deb Brown do their first presentation this morning. So they also brought or sent our community to the Main Street Now conference, and we were really excited about that to have that opportunity to go out to Seattle. Excuse me here. So when we came back from this conference, we had some really good ideas, really neat ideas, and we started with putting music downtown. We had 3 blocks of music basically piped in, and it was XM radio, and we did that for $26.99 a month. So we were trying to kind of create an experience. So when you come downtown, we wanted to focus on murals, and we do have hanging flower baskets, and we really wanted to just make it a place that you'd want to go to. So when Deb Brown was here, she showed us one of our storefronts that wood probably had been there for about 2 or 3 years. And she said, you've got to take care of that. So what we did is we reached out to the city, reached out to the landlord and said, hey, we'd like to commission a local artist to do something with this. So we had an event coming up. It's called Springtime in the Village. And we commissioned an artist to paint something on there. And we just really didn't put any parameters on him. And he just did it. But we did want him to do it during the event when people were walking down the street. And he did this with a roller. And it just provided much more action. If you see that, it's just a beautiful, beautiful image. And that landlord started getting calls right away, very next day. Hey, what's going on? Is there a restaurant coming in here? We want to be a part of this. And then we started working on, we went back to that experience, and we ordered some bistro lights, and we just installed those all the way downtown. There's 3,000 foot of fully programmable bistro lights, and I can actually change them from my phone to whatever color we want. But during this process, we learned, basically from Main Street Now and Deb Brown, that you have to get involved with your community and find out, who the people are and what they're doing. And we met with the landlords, and this landlord here, this is an 8,000 square foot building. It was, it had been vacant for a while. And we pitched to them the idea or the concept to offer free rent for 30 days and free utilities. And then we offered the idea of a pop-up shop. So in June of 19, we talked about the concept of a pop-up shop, and we got 20 people that totally interested. Those are the people that want to expand a business, move here, or create a new business. Well, it just kind of became overwhelming to us. So I found a storefront owner that was willing to take that project over. You notice the date on this is July 8th, 2019. And I guess my main goal here is to tell you that you can take small steps. And as Becky said this morning, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can't wait for it to be perfect. You've got to start, and so far we haven't spent any money on this. This empty space was ready to go, and on July 8th we really started the program. And the first tenant came in on the 26th. He got so excited when he saw the place that he went and found the landlord and said, "Hey, I want a long-term lease." And I said, "That is not how pop-up shops are supposed to work." So then we had a problem. We had 19 other people trying to get in behind him, and he wanted the whole 8,000 square foot. So we put the other 19 people in with him, and they all got free rent for 30 days. Now look at this. I could have taken this picture July 26th, but I took it July 8th. Just look what a few days makes. This is August 3rd. This is just a few days later. This was their opening day. They had 400 people come through here. And what have we done? We've given some free rent to the landlord. Wasn't getting any rent before anyways, you know. So we were really, really excited about that. And that you can make a difference. So at the beginning of 18, we had 8 open storefronts. We filled 5 we filled 5 storefronts with really good businesses, and 2 of them were from this gentleman that originally moved in, and it's their life. This guy actually quit his job to do this. So we were really excited. We also focused on events, and our council wanted to try to attract more people downtown. So we created what they call a designated outdoor refreshment area, where we have a local brewery there where they can come in, grab the beer, grab a wine, and walk down to our events. We hired a local artist for a chalk event. This gentleman is a world-renowned chalk artist. He's from Pittsburgh. It's about 40 minutes away from our house. In 2 days, he came. He charged us $1,000 to do this, and this is just midway through. But you can see people standing around. They're very excited, and they want to, they want to be part of it. We also hired 5 other artists, but we paid for them with sponsors to our first event, and it was called Chalk on Main. So, we started getting momentum, and that was really nice. And then COVID hit. So now what? Well, what can we do to help our businesses? And our progress committee, we have 2 council members. They actually went to 11 business owners in early July and said, "Hey, what can we do for you right now?" And a couple of them said, "Hey, we want curbside parking for, so you can, text an order in and they can run it out." So we, like Becky said this morning, it doesn't have to be perfect. You can just do something temporary. So a couple businesses wanted this curbside parking. We created it, and we found out in 35, 40 days that they didn't want it. It didn't work. They just didn't like it. So we got rid of it. And we didn't spend any money, but allowed them to put a sandwich board out by the road that said, temporary parking for curbside pickup. So then council wanted to do a few other things. So we allowed, and our governor encouraged us to do things for communities or for our storefronts to expand seating. So we created temporary resolution to allow people to sit outside in the right of way and eat. And also we expanded our DORA so you can come out and drink at the same time. So the other concept was, hey, let's get them a lot of seating. So again, it didn't have to be perfect, but we started thinking, and by the way, these are two businesses, 2 empty businesses here when this photo was taken back in 2019. And in the next couple photos, you'll see that they're opening and thriving. But the idea was to shut down this alley. And instead of developing a committee, like Becky said this morning, that, you know, we're going to get bogged down. We reacted very quickly. The city came in, paved it, and we knew it didn't have to be perfect. We learned from Deb Brown telling us, you know, you don't have to spend all this months planning. Let's just throw it together. And we're very proud. Within 2 weeks, we had borrowed seating from our park, and we borrowed plantings from our park, and we did spend some money out front there, you know, to keep cars from going. Those are bollards there, protected by blocks, cement blocks. You can see Columbiana Nutrition, they moved in this year. They also had 400 people come in on their first day. They're getting supported by the community. And Salon Anthurium, they were voted nice as the best salon in Northeastern Ohio, like 10 days after they had started. So you can make a difference. So 2019 was very interesting. Like I said, Deb Brown came in. She did her embedded experience from Save Your Town. She taught us a lot, and we started getting momentum. We started having events, and then my phone rings in June. It's I think it was either the 20th or 21st. It's Deb Brown wakes me up in the middle of the morning and says, "Hey, you are in the Reader's Digest." And I said, "What are you talking about? We're in the Reader's Digest." Well, our local special needs theater was submitted to Reader's Digest for the nicest place in Ohio, and it was a really exciting time. They said that, hey, you are now the city and the theater are up for nicest place in America contest, and the voting closes on July 23rd. My wife and I got a tent together. We went out the 4th of July. We have 15,000 people there for fireworks, and we started getting people to vote. And by 3 o'clock, we were in third place. By 8:30, we were in second place, and by 10:15, we were in first place. And that's awesome, you know. So that was the quantitative aspect. Now we have the qualitative aspect, where the Reader's Digest came in, and they had their own embedded experience. They brought in reporters and cameras and such, and spent a long time, couple weeks with us, so we knew we were in the running. We were really, really excited that they invited us to do a video promotion for them on October 10th of 19, and we did it at the theater. There was 400 people there, and the special needs groups came in and they did their a couple scenes of the plays, and it was really fun. And we reminisced about all the fun that we had doing this, and we were hoping we were going to win. And you know, they took all types of videos, and it was like 2 hours program. So then we got up to leave. We're walking out. They said, "Hey, you know, stop, go back, find your seats." So we went back and found our seats, and then out pops the CEO of the Reader's Digest, and he says, "Hey, I'm here to tell you that you guys are the nicest place in America," and we won, and it was great. So we started small. I truly believe that we would have never, if we didn't have that momentum of bringing that community together in June, you know, already formed, that we would have never been able to compete on a national level and beat out, you know, 50 other or 49 other states. But it was a great year, and you know, thanks for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Lance. That you delivered the goods on you know, kind of 0 to 60 in 1 year. Going to be, I will say that calling yourself the nicest place in America will be some fighting words with your Northern New England colleagues, Northern New England and Northern New York colleagues who are on this panel. But we understand, and congratulations on that. That's a pretty amazing story. So what I'm going to do now, other than taking this opportunity to thank our panelists again for sharing all of this with us, I think you've all been celebrated. I hope you've taken some of those comments in the chat feature from people who I think are getting a lot from your ideas. And what I'll ask people in the audience to do is continue to just post questions on the chat function, and I'll be responsible for kind of coordinating the Q&A portion of what we're going to do. I also promised our panelists in my email to them yesterday that they would be able to ask each other questions if they had any questions about what each other were doing. I am going to now, though, assert my moderator's privilege and start off with a question that I have, which is, I'm going to start with Susie and Sarah. I'd really like to know, we may have some audience members who are really impressed by the funding packages that you've put together. And actually, Laura, this may go to you as well, but who are really impressed by putting the funding packages that you've put together, but maybe saying, like, how do I get started? I mean, you've listed the grants that you've put together, that you've gotten. I know, Lance, you had a huge number that you put out there. I'm just wondering if you could just talk a little bit about, like, what were those first steps? What type of expertise did you need to seek? That kind of stuff that might be really helpful for somebody who's just really getting started walking down this path.
I guess I'll start.
Please, yeah, that'd be great.
What we did was we asked the owner to go out and look to see what they could afford with traditional lending. And at that point, we were able to determine what the gap was. And from there, we assessed what type of grant we were looking for, because not every grant applies for every project. And because this was a lodging facility and it was a business development, we were able to match it up with a state CDBG grant for economic development. And that's a one-for-one match. So for the $300,000 they received, they had to match with $300,000. But they were able to match that, since they were going out for traditional lending for $850,000. And then there was still a remainder of a gap, and we matched up the Rural Energy America program with the HVAC system. So we were able to close in on that gap. And then local government just helped out with on-site parking so they can meet our local ordinance. And so that's how we went about for making that vacant building prosper and tax revenue.
Cool, thank you. Sarah or Laura, do you want to add any thoughts?
Yeah, so I mean, to give you a sense, we started out with $28 in our bank account. And what we really did was, first of all, was create a vision. And I wouldn't underestimate the talent in your community. So the creating of the vision, I mean, Lance talked a lot about artists. These were local artists that pulled together these vision, local architect. So we created a vision. And then, as Laura said, you'll find funding that fits if your vision is broad, right? We were talking about commerce, we were talking about art, we were talking about transportation, we were talking about history. So if you can make your vision broad and have a lot of different hooks, then you become attractive to different funding sources. And then, because we had such community engagement, people would say, oh, by the way, I heard that. And so then we began applying for grants. We did get a small member item from our legislator to help us flesh out those plans and make them, because a lot of people want you to be ready. But literally, we just heard about things and we phased in the project. I mean, this thing took 10 years. That didn't happen all at once. And we centralized it so that as opportunities came up, we could plug into them. So a really good example is the septic system, right? It doesn't use much energy, so it made it interesting to NYSERDA. The lights and the benches and stuff, that was important for the farmers market. Then New York State released this new program, Restore New York, and we got funding for 3 buildings for it. So we were ready. We were just kind of ready, and we could take advantage of things as we could. We also got pledges for things. So we asked people for purchasing the property. We got pledges because we had $28, so we didn't know if we could. So we got pledges, and then we could match that with a grant that we got from Federal Highway, because these were historic rail buildings. So, again, you can think of things to do things, what if, but, if you have a great vision and plan, it'll come to fruition. You just have to give it time.
Excellent. Thank you, Sarah. Laura, did you want to add anything to that before I dive into these chat questions? Oh, I'm sorry, we're not hearing you again, Laura.
I muted myself. That was me. Sorry.
Oh, okay. Now
So,
you're crystal clear.
there you go. So one of the questions that I think people might have is, you talk about all of this funding. Well, what funding? Where do I go to find out what's out there? Well, the answer is there is no such thing as one all-encompassing site as to the kinds of funding that's out there. It would be the full-time job of probably more than one person to keep track of everything that's out there at any one time. So basically what I would suggest is sometimes your congressional representatives will have lists of funding sources that are available. I would look at your state economic development authorities. They will frequently, and again, it might be tied to a specific agency, whether it's related to economic development or transportation. So you can also look at the agencies related to the topic that you're trying to fund. There's also a federal site, grants.gov, where you can sometimes get information about federal information. But again, the hard part is there is no all-encompassing site. So it'll take a little bit of work, but you can search by your topic. You can go to your, again, local and regional professional people and just start compiling a list of what might work, and then take a look at the specifics of the funding source.
Yeah, that's sound advice, Laura. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
So thanks for answering that. I am now going to dive into some questions that we had come up in the chat, and I'm just going to take these in order. And the first one is for Laurel. Laurel, Kevin wants to know, what techniques do you use to reach out to new Americans or other underserved populations, which I think is a really critical question for all of us right now.
Sure. So we really found that going to them versus, advertising and expecting them to come to us was the way to get this done. So a lot of grassroots outreach and effort, a lot of attending cultural fairs or meetings. I spent several really nice Sundays talking to groups after their Sunday morning church services. So, kind of a lot of that. And we found that once we'd made the first couple of loans, those folks really became ambassadors. And by far, we get the largest number of new clients in that demographic from direct referrals. So they'll say, hey, this is the real deal. They helped us get our business going, and making a referral to someone else. So it's word of mouth and grassroots outreach. It's a little bit tough right now because, we're all kind of stuck in the Zoom or pop-in mode where we're on video calls, so we can't do quite as much of that as we'd hope. But the program has enough legs at this point that I think, we're still getting great response from our current clients referring others to the program.
Thanks, Laurel. That's good advice. So Lewis wants to know, have any communities attracted program-related investment funding from local or regional foundations? Sounds like no.
No.
Good thought. Always important to think about multiple opportunities for the funding stack, but it sounds like we don't have any examples of that here. Sorry, Lewis. Carrie Sands says, any thoughts from the speakers or participants about an overall quote unquote formula for sparking entrepreneurship? Is there a perfect storm of space plus funding plus local champions plus economic trends plus natural resources that anyone has seen? Or is this an artificial idea given what we've heard today about small steps rather than big perfect packages?
I have a comment.
Great.
So I think if you have some shops on Main Street, they have a sphere of influence of people that have been wanting to step out and do things. And if you go get to know those storefront owners and talk to them and say, ask them the same question that you just asked us, they may have, they may know somebody from another city that may want to expand a business, and they have a lot of ideas, and you're not reinventing the wheel. And the other thing that happens too is if somebody on Main Street it feels bought into the process, and that they've helped bring another business in, you don't have that friction of when another business comes in that's like, oh man, they're going to be, no, you help bring them in. So I think the spark, the entrepreneurial aspect is to go to the root of what you already have and start there.
I just want to say, from my perspective, that I think a lot of what we're talking about in this session today is really how communities can do things like, I can't remember which, I think it was maybe Sarah or Susie said, asked us to raise our hands and say how many of us have a kind of a abandoned building problem in our community. Like, I think, how do we pull the sources of funding and the know-how together to make that building into something that's attractive for small businesses to be able to try things out. And I think that dovetails actually into Lance's example of the pop-up. And even though I think that actually turned into a little bit of a success story that you didn't anticipate, meaning that you had somebody ready to go on day one and kind of kick out the pop-ups and do what they wanted to do full time. I think that's an example of how, that space became something that allowed small business owners to try something out without having to necessarily go down that traditional path of signing a year-long lease, putting in a lot of equipment, doing all that. I mean, that's just very unrealistic for a lot of would-be entrepreneurs in big cities and in small rural communities. It's just it's a big barrier to entry to a business that wants to start out. So, excellent question. Let's see, there was another question actually for you, Sarah. Sarah, in your opinion, where should traffic management fit into the layout of already established businesses? This person's obviously from New Hampshire. In Jaffrey, I'm aware that a well-appreciated business was closed in order to install a rotary for the roadway. Obviously, they say a roadway is not the same as a septic system, but I'm curious as to where it would rank in the aforementioned scenario. So traffic, of course, and parking and all those things that are vital to towns as they think about, bringing more people in, that creates some problems, I think, is the kind of summary of that question.
Yeah, so that's a good question. I mean, that's really what was facing this block, was there was only like 19 spaces on Main Street for, multiple businesses, including restaurants. And so we, so part of it is just making people aware of that. We did a bit, not us, the village actually retracted funding for a visualization study. And so there was some effort to try and think more, and even in our comprehensive planning process, about where parking could emerge in the future. With regard to a roundabout, there are some actually dangerous intersections in the village of Cambridge, and a local community did do a roundabout, and I think it's proved pretty fruitful. But I sympathize with the person that, to take down a building to make that happen may well be more detrimental. But yeah, so I don't fully have an answer to your question, but just that if you create the mindset of collaboration with parking, when opportunities arise, you may well be able to get that parking in or address that traffic issue that you're facing. It's a good question.
Yeah, I agree. And so the next question was directed at you, Sarah. You're getting put on the spot a lot, but I actually think that probably most of our panelists have something to contribute to this one, which was, how do we get the community engaged? And this is coming from an individual that says we struggle with low population density, and so and the challenges, they say, for interest in economic development that come in low income areas. So again, that engagement, enthusiasm, support. It's one thing to sort of build the project and get the money together for the building and do all that, but then it's another thing to make sure that people are on board, and that this is also a vision that's co-created with your community, that it's also what they want as well. So I think again, even though you're welcome to start, Sarah, but I think that probably all of you have something to contribute to this.
Yeah, I mean, that what's if you look at our timeline on this, we spent a lot of time, as Laura was saying, going to each building owner and ask them what their needs were, what their vision was, and then bringing them all to when we realized they all needed septic and they all needed parking, and so a number of businesses wanted to grow. We're like, oh, well, we need to come together. So it really grew organically out of listening. And there was a lot of time spent on that. I mean, it took a long time to get to those pictures. And we also, when we formed this organization, we worked by consensus. So that we would spend a lot of time planning, and obviously when we moved through but so working by consensus, and we had very different viewpoints on the board, I think is very helpful as well. And I think that, as Becky said, things are infectious. So, while this project was going on, we were getting a balloon festival going and, other things to bring people downtown. But it was really listening to people and asking them what their needs are, and then helping them find a way to fulfill those. So it was pretty, it was just a lot of listening and taking to heart and facilitating what they would need to make that happen. Sort of what Lance said, they needed a space, you create a space. Just listen.
Yeah, great points. Susie, Laura, something to add there?
Yeah, actually, I think another thing that I can add is just doing it by example. I mean, there's a story of a nearby community that part of the area was economically, let's call it, very downtrodden. You had a lifelong citizen who wanted to put what was a slightly upscale business for that area, but it was his home and he was determined and he was going to do it. So there was a little old lady who was a next door neighbor and didn't have any money, couldn't mow her lawn. So he had his crew mow her lawn for her. So he started helping out people in the neighborhood. And then there was a next door, sort of a two-family building. And one of the gentlemen who lived in the upstairs apartment stopped by and said, I want you to come see my patio. And the business is like, well, okay, we'll go look at the patio. And he had put flower pots out on his patio. I mean, this was like a neighborhood that just sort of didn't have a lot of interest, didn't have a lot of hope, but they started seeing just a few good things and then started feeling more part of a community. So as Sarah said, it's that collaboration and reach out and you make a difference, and then somebody else takes interest and they join and promote the interest.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you added that point, Laura. Susie, do you want to add anything from Fort Kent perspective?
Sure. So for Fort Kent, we created a downtown economic development group, and we created a working plan that fit our local ordinance. So we worked towards our project goals from that working plan. So that was our first step, and that's how we got people involved. And like Laura, we have a local florist who created some blockhouse planters and donated all the flowers and went throughout town. He made 40 blockhouse planters, put them throughout town just to revitalize and get people's spirits up. And then the following year, he did the same thing, but in the fall with fall planters. So, he was very creative, got people's spirits up. So people are wanting to revitalize or make sure that their window fronts were clean. So it was a work in progress, but it all started with a working group and a working plan. And we took tiny steps and revitalized our downtown.
Yeah, well said. Thank you. And thanks for that question. A panelist that is a segment of the economy and I think of culture that's not present here today is the arts community, but it was present, meaning on the panel. I know that we have representatives in the audience. And I just want to say a little bit about the fact that, clearly I'm acknowledging that we're in the middle of a global pandemic and people are stressed out. And I think one thing that has been a saving grace for some people is the ability to engage with arts and the cultural aspects of their communities, especially during the warmer months that we've just are coming to the end of in Vermont, but but we'll return again. And I know that, there's things like the Ice Carnival in Keene, New Hampshire and stuff like that, places to get outside and see artists at work and things like that. I'm just wondering, even though it can be hard sometimes to get some of these larger sources of funding that have been identified today, specifically dedicated to projects of this nature, I just wondered if you all could speak a little bit about the importance of the arts in your communities in terms of bringing people together, and also just kind of being a catalyst for some of this activity. I'm happy for anybody to take that.
Yeah, I can make a couple of comments. I definitely see arts and the creative economy is a huge part of an economic ecosystem. One of the reasons is I think it's a lot easier to wrap your head around and join an arts project is more exciting than maybe a sewer project. So sewer projects are clearly necessary, but people can get emotionally involved with the arts, whereas sewer, maybe not so much. The other thing, at least where we are, we're in an upstate rural area, I would definitely link agriculture and agritourism to arts and the creative economy. I think foodie travel, connection of arts and food has become a big movement, especially in the past couple of years. You look at the advent of all the craft breweries and the wineries. All of those things contribute to huge portions of the economy. And the more you start having clusters of those arts-focused projects, businesses, events, the more it tends to build on itself. So yeah, I think it's a very big part of any economic recovery.
Well said, thank you. Anyone else want to add?
No, just clearly Hubbard Hall, which is our art center, was a driver in this project. And moving forward, there is also an artist cooperative that's part of the block and in Hubbard Hall actually. This weekend, actually, Washington County Fairgrounds, which is in the next town over, is hosting the Southern Adirondack Fiber Festival. The arts are, as Laura said, sort of integrated into agriculture and our way of life here. So yeah, no question, it's a huge element of keeping our downtown vibrant and our communities vibrant as well.
Excellent. Thank you. We had another question come up from Lewis, who says he has a general question for the panel. And this one I think is really about tools. Basically, you all have talked about kind of doing community outreach, information gathering from business owners and community members. What tools did you use to gather those data, analyze those data, et cetera? is there a secret sauce software package? Was this a big Excel spreadsheet? Legal pads? What was your what were your tools of choice?
I'll just jump in real quick and say kind of the backbone for us was a study done by the Carsey School at UNH, which the Endowment for Health here in New Hampshire helped us pay for. They really felt like we needed some hard data on our populations, on entrepreneurship within our immigrant population, and we used that kind of to base our strategy for where to go out, where to visit, where to market to, and what other resources could help.
Thanks, Laurel. And I know that sometimes there can be, I think that's a great point about partnerships. I mean, all of us probably are proximate to or within a region. There are colleges, universities, community colleges, other places where we might be able to partner for some expertise, where that expertise doesn't necessarily exist in the community, or doesn't exist, I should say, within the volunteer sphere that may be working on a particular project. So what are some of the ways that we can package that together? So we are about 9 minutes out from the end of our session today. And I just want to ask, just general for the panel, if you have any final comments or sort of parting thoughts, maybe for our audience, based on all the things that you all have talked about in your presentations, but also some of the things that have come up from the audience with questions or something you may want to react to from your fellow panelists. I am going to go a little bit round robin on this, and if you're allowed to pass, so if you totally fine. I'm the first person I'm seeing in the upper left of my screen is Susie. So Susie, I'll start with you, and then we'll go to Sarah next, and then Laura and Lance and Laurel, and then I'll tie things up.
Well, I'd like to thank you for inviting me to be one of the presenters. And as I've said earlier, if anyone has any questions in regards to grant writing or trying to pull some projects together, I'd be glad to help in any way possible. They can just reach me through my email. And I'm not sure if you'll be putting out our emails or how you'll be putting out our information for people that want to reach out to us after this session, but I'm available, Town of Fort Kent, to answer any questions, and I'd love to chat with anyone that has any ideas and would just want to get some feedback. Thank you.
Thanks, Susie. And I'm just going to interrupt and say that before I go to Sarah, and just say that I am going to compile your names, affiliations, things like that, and I'll work with Sarah Powell at Hannah Grimes to make sure that that's shared out so that our audience can access it. Thanks for bringing that up. Yeah, Sarah?
I'm sorry, I answered a call from an elderly member of my family being concerned there was something wrong, so I didn't hear your question.
Oh, well, first of all, I hope everything's okay.
Yes.
Good. That's the most important thing.
Yeah.
Second, I'm just going round robin and asking for any kind of summary thoughts, reactions that you may have had that, based on the audience questions or what other panelists had to say today or something like that as we kind of near the end of our session here.
Great. No, I guess it was fun to hear about what people have done in the shorter term as you're waiting for those 10 years to go by and realize a broader vision to make things happen. And it was really inspiring to hear other people's comments about the little things that you can do just to bring people out and engage new audiences. So I very much appreciated that. And I'm happy to talk with anyone that's interested in learning more about the septic or anything else. But about the project that we worked on in Cambridge. But thank you, this has been wonderful.
Thanks, Sarah. Laura.
So I think, and I echo the earlier comments, appreciate the opportunity to be on the panel. I hope there's some useful information that comes out that communities everywhere can share. I think in summary, I would just say that when you're looking at economic revitalization, there just is no one size fits all solution. To me, you're going to have local community heroes who are out there really trying and advocating. And one of the most critical things is to listen, listen to what people are saying, what are the needs, what are the real issues, because sometimes things can be solved fairly simply with small projects. That Lance was an example of that. You start out small and look at sort of the snowball effect that it happens. And that community collaboration piece is really critical. I mean, once you start that listening process, you start to understand, oh, well, he has this idea and he has that resource. Let's put them together and see what we can make happen from there. So, I don't think anybody is saying it's easy. It takes work, it takes listening, it takes collaboration, and it takes the desire to get from point A to point B. But if you put all of that together, you can create projects, you can fund them. You just have to have the patience to see it through.
Yeah, that's well put. Thank you. Lance.
Sure. Lewis had asked about, what tools we use. I use a legal pad, but I would recommend reaching out to your, local government and have them get involved with like Rural Communities Citizens Partnership. They're all over the United States, and you can start there and you have, use their tools. and have them do the surveys that they performed. And we also have another local, it's a Pittsburgh, it's a consultant, and they're measuring our vibrancy index in our town. And again, it's some complicated formulas, but they bring us back. So I would say that there is help out there to kind of speed up this process, because 4 years ago I had no, I mean, I can't believe I'm sitting here, and especially if you talk to RCAP, the first meeting I had with them, I'm like, what do you want to do? And now it took a couple years to get us invested in the process, but that all helps. So I think that the main thing is there's a couple tools out there that you could use. Maybe it's a consultant, maybe it's RCAP, maybe it's somebody else, but nonprofit associations that can help do this. But they work better if you get the government, somebody from the city or village involved, because their buy-in, you can actually get some traction and move forward.
Thank you, Lance. Appreciate that.
Yep.
And Laurel, you have the last word before. Actually, I have the last word, but you have the penultimate. You have the penultimate word.
I would just add, our most successful projects, including the New Americans Fund, but many other things we do. The biggest part of that for us is the public-private partnership. Keeping a really strong relationship with developers and listening to them. What tools, what financing tools can we bring to bridge a gap for them that will allow them to move forward a project that's very important to the region, whether it be affordable housing, which is a really big deal where we are, or commercial or industrial development. So we have several developers we work with on a regular basis, and it's important to listen to them and help design products that can get those projects done.
Yeah, well said. Well, thank you all again. I really appreciate it. I'm going to hand out one award. The Perseverance Award goes to Laura Oswald for pushing through your technology challenges. Thank you so much. I think on the whole, we came through this really, really well. And I think we had a robust discussion. I wish it was not 10:45, because I think we probably could pull a lot more questions and have, delve into many other topics. But thank you all. I'm sorry if you felt like this was a bait and switch with regard to the beer situation, that I did not provide beer to you. But I appreciate that all of our panelists played along and at least referenced it and maybe pointed us to a couple of stops that when it's safe to travel again, we can stop in their communities and continue the conversation. So thanks, everyone. Enjoy Radically Rural. I hope you all pick up all of the amazing stuff that's going to happen at this conference today. And thanks again to our panelists. And I hope everyone will be well and stay well and enjoy the fall.
Thank you.
Thank you.